He abandoned his wife and little daughter in the flood for money. The Lagos rain had already swallowed the streets when David Okoro tightened his grip on the sack of US dollars. Behind him, his wife Mary screamed his name, clutching their little daughter as floodwater rose to her chest. David looked back once, then turned away and walked toward safety. What would you do if the person you trusted most chose money over you and your child? Before this story continues, like this video, subscribe and comment what you think David should have done. The flood came without warning that August night in Ajagunle, creeping through the narrow streets like a thief. Most families had grown used to the seasonal rains, the way water pooled in front of their zinc-roofed homes, and how children splashed through ankle-deep puddles on their way to school. But this rain was different. It fell like judgment, heavy and relentless, turning roads into rivers and hope into desperation. David had been counting money when the first warnings came. Not Naira, US dollars, crisp $100 bills that smelled of promise and tasted of betrayal. They lay spread across the wooden table in their one-room apartment. More money than he'd ever seen in his 32 years of life. $15,000, enough to change everything. "David!" Mary's voice cut through the drumming rain on their roof. "The water is rising! We need to leave now!" He didn't look up. His fingers moved mechanically, sorting, stacking, binding the bills with rubber bands. Each movement was precise, almost loving. And this money represented everything he'd sacrificed for. 6 months of lies, of secret meetings in dimly lit bars, of carrying packages he never opened and asking no questions. 6 months of becoming someone Mary wouldn't recognize. Their daughter, Blessing, only 4 years old, pressed her small face against the window. "Mama, the water is eating our street." Mary pulled the child close, her eyes fixed on her husband. She'd watched him change over these past months. The David she married, the mechanic who sang gospel songs while fixing engines, who saved his last 500 Naira to buy Blessing a birthday cake, had disappeared. In his place sat a stranger who came home smelling of expensive cigarettes and spoke in whispers on phones he hid from her. "David, please," Mary's voice trembled. "Whatever that is, we can come back for it. Our daughter—" "You don't understand," he muttered, finally meeting her eyes. The hardness she saw there made her step back. "This is our ticket out of this hell, out of this flooding slum, out of poverty, out of everything. Not if we drown trying to protect it." Outside, their neighbors were already fleeing. Mrs. Adeyemi from next door waded past their window, her 3 children clinging to her wrapper. Mr. Ibrahim carried his elderly mother on his back, his shop's entire inventory left to the mercy of the flood. The water was now waist-high in the street, rising faster than anyone had predicted. David stood abruptly, shoving the money into a waterproof sack he'd prepared weeks ago, as if he'd known this moment would come, as if he'd planned for everything except his family's escape. He hefted the bag over his shoulder, contesting its weight. 30 pounds of future, 30 pounds of freedom. "Let's go," he said flatly. Mary grabbed Blessing, wrapping the child in a thin blanket that would be useless against the flood. They pushed through their door into chaos. The water struck Mary's chest with shocking cold, stealing her breath. Blessing screamed, clutching her mother's neck so tightly it hurt. The current was stronger than Mary had imagined. It pulled at her legs, trying to sweep her feet from under her. All around them, people struggled through the darkness. Some carrying children, others dragging belongings, all moving toward the higher ground of the main road 2 streets away. David moved ahead, the waterproof sack held high above his head. He was taller, stronger, and he moved with purpose while Mary struggled to keep Blessing's head above water. David, wait," Mary called out, but her voice was lost in the roar of the flood and the cries of their neighbors. He didn't wait. A piece of corrugated zinc roofing swept past them, spinning in the current. Mary stumbled, going under for a terrifying second. When she surfaced, gasping and coughing, Blessing was screaming in her arms. "David!" Mary's scream was raw with terror. "David, help us!" He was 20 feet ahead now, nearly at the corner where the water was shallower. He turned. In the weak light from someone's emergency lamp, Mary saw his face clearly. She saw the calculation in his eyes, the weight of the money versus the weight of his family. She saw him look at the sack on his shoulder, then back at them. And in that moment, Mary understood. She saw the choice he'd already made, perhaps weeks ago, perhaps months ago. She saw that the David she loved had drowned long before this flood came. "I'm sorry," he mouthed, though the words were lost in the storm. Then he turned and kept walking. Mary's legs gave out. She went under again, this time with Blessing. The floodwater filled her mouth, her nose, tasting of sewage and broken dreams. Her feet couldn't find the ground. The current was taking them, pulling them back toward the deeper water, toward the submerged homes and certain death. Strong hands grabbed her arm. Mr. Ibrahim, who'd already gotten his mother to safety, had come back. He pulled Mary up, pushed her toward a half-submerged car, something to hold on to. "Where is David?" he shouted. Mary couldn't speak. She held Blessing to her chest, feeling the child's heartbeat against her own, but then watched the space where her husband had disappeared. The night stretched endlessly. Mr. Ibrahim and 2 other neighbors stayed with Mary and Blessing, helping them reach the emergency shelter the local church had opened. Inside, surrounded by other flood victims, Mary sat on a thin mat with her daughter wrapped in a borrowed wrapper. Blessing had finally stopped crying, exhausted into silence, but her eyes, her father's eyes, stared at her mother with a question too big for her small mouth to ask. Mary's phone, wrapped in plastic, had survived. One message waited, a text from David's number, sent 20 minutes ago. "I'll send for you both when I'm settled." This was the only way. Around them, neighbors whispered. Someone had seen David climb into a private car at the main road, the waterproof sack still clutched to his chest. And as someone else mentioned hearing about a man who'd been running errands for the area boys, the local gang that controlled everything from protection rackets to smuggling. Mrs. Adeyemi, wringing out her soaked wrapper, said what everyone was thinking. "That man has sold his soul. Money from blood always demands blood in return." Mary said nothing. She stared at the shelter's tin roof, listening to the rain that had finally begun to ease. Her body was there, shivering and exhausted, but her mind was somewhere else, somewhere cold and clear and calculating. She thought of the marriage vows David had spoken 7 years ago. She thought of Blessing's first steps and how David had wept with joy. She thought of every sacrifice she'd made, and every night shift she'd worked as a nurse's aide to keep their family afloat while David chased his dreams. And she thought of the look on his face when he chose money over their lives. Mary pulled Blessing closer and whispered into the darkness. "If you chose money over us, I will teach you what real loss feels like." The other women in the shelter thought she was praying. They nodded in sympathy, assuming she was asking God for her husband's safety, for his return, for reconciliation. They didn't understand. This wasn't a prayer. It was a promise. Should Mary forgive him or make him pay? Comment your answer and share this story before next chapter. 3 months later, Mary sees a photo online. David, alive, smiling, rich, living large in Victoria Island under a new name. The notification appeared on Mary's cracked phone screen at 2 a.m. during her break between nursing shifts at the mainland hospital. She'd been scrolling mindlessly through Facebook, too tired to sleep, too wired to rest. Then she saw it. A tagged photo in a mutual friend's post from a Victoria Island nightclub. David. Her David. Except he wasn't hers anymore, and he didn't look like the man who'd left her drowning 3 months ago. This David wore a tailored agbada in cream silk, gold glinting at his wrists and neck. His smile was wide, confident, the smile of a man who'd never known poverty, never known guilt. He stood surrounded by laughing friends, a bottle of expensive cognac in one hand, the VIP section of Club Quilox glowing behind him. The caption read, "Big things happening." The hashtag new beginnings, hashtag Victoria Island life, hashtag blessed. Mary's hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the phone. "Sister Mary, you good?" Nurse Patience touched her shoulder gently. Mary couldn't speak. She zoomed in on the photo, studying every detail. His face had filled out. Good food, easy living. His skin glowed with health and expensive skincare. Even his posture had changed. He stood like a man who belonged in that world of champagne and luxury cars. While she'd spent 3 months sleeping on her brother Joseph's floor in Festac, taking double shifts to afford Blessing's school fees, eating once a day to save money, David had been living like royalty. The flood had destroyed everything they owned. Their landlord had refused to let them back into the apartment, claiming they owed 6 months' rent. Mary's savings had gone to immediate survival. Food, medicine for Blessing's pneumonia from that night in the water, transport to her nursing jobs across Lagos. She'd lost weight, her uniform hanging loose on her frame. Her hands were rough from constant washing at the hospital. She fell asleep mid-sentence sometimes, exhaustion claiming her between heartbeats. And David was drinking cognac that cost more than her monthly salary. "I'm fine," Mary whispered, though she wasn't. She saved the photo, her mind already working. The next morning, after her shift ended, Mary sat in a cramped internet cafe in Festac. She created a fake Facebook account and began researching. David Okoro had become David Okafor. Small change, easy to explain. His profile was semi-private, but what she could see told a story. New car, new apartment, new friends. No mention of a wife or daughter, no trace of his old life in Ajagunle. He'd erased them completely. Mary's brother Joseph found her there 3 hours later, still scrolling, taking screenshots, making notes. "Mary, you haven't slept," Joseph said, pulling up a plastic chair beside her. "This isn't healthy." "Look." Mary turned the screen toward him. "Look at what he's doing with the money he chose over his daughter's life." Joseph's jaw tightened. He'd been the one who'd wanted to go to the police immediately. Mary had stopped him, though she couldn't explain why. Not yet. "We should still report him," Joseph said. "The law?" Mary laughed bitterly. "The police will ask for money to even file a report, and David clearly has money now. He'll pay them off." "So what? You just let him win?" Mary closed the laptop carefully. "I didn't say that." Something in her voice made Joseph study her face more closely. The soft-spoken Mary who'd tolerated David's secrets had drowned in that floodwater. The woman who'd emerged was harder, sharper, patient in a way that felt dangerous. "What are you planning?" he asked quietly. "I'm planning to survive. I'm planning to give Blessing a good life. And I'm planning to make sure David understands what he's lost." She showed Joseph another screenshot. A flyer David had shared, advertising luxury apartments in Lekki. Comments on real estate pages, inquiries about international schools, a liked post about relocating to London. "He's planning to leave Nigeria," Mary said. "Soon." "And you want to stop him?" "No." Mary's smile was cold. "I want him to go. But not the way he's planned." Over the next 2 weeks, Mary worked her shifts and played detective. She discovered David's new social circle, young men who'd come into money quickly. She found the club where he spent Thursday nights, the restaurant where he had Sunday brunch. She learned he was telling people his wife had died in the flood, that he was a widower who'd lost everything and rebuilt from ashes. People sympathized, admired his resilience, bought him drinks. The audacity of it stole Mary's breath. He'd killed her in his story, made himself the victim. It was her friend Ruth who became the first piece of Mary's plan. Ruth worked as a cocktail server at Club Quilox. Over cheap suya and malt drinks, Mary made her request. I need to know everything about him. Who he meets, what he talks about, how he pays. Ruth studied Mary's face. They'd been friends since secondary school. This man really hurt you. He left me and his daughter to drown, Ruth, while he saved money. Ruth's expression hardened. I'll help you. My cousin works in immigration at the airport, and my brother does IT stuff, data recovery, that kind of thing. He's in London now. Mary felt something settle in her chest. Purpose. The next piece came from Mrs. Adeyemi, their former neighbor from Ajagunle. I saw your husband at ShopRite. I confronted him, asked about you and Blessing. He claimed not to know me. Mary closed her eyes. Thank you for telling me. That's not all. I followed him to his car, a new Mercedes. I took photos of his license plate, and I heard him on the phone arguing. He kept saying, I did my part. Where's the rest of my payment? Mary's pulse quickened. Can you send me everything? Already sent to your WhatsApp. Mary, whatever that man is involved in, it's not clean. Be careful. I will be, Mary promised. That night, after Blessing had fallen asleep, Mary organized everything she'd gathered. Photos, screenshots, testimony from Mrs. Adeyemi, Ruth's observations, the timeline of David's sudden wealth. She pulled up an old folk tale her grandmother used to tell about Anansi the spider. The spider does not rush, grandmother would say. It weaves carefully, patiently, and when the web is complete, the prey cannot escape. Mary was weaving her web. She sent carefully worded messages to Ruth's cousin in London, explaining she needed background research on financial transactions. She made notes on David's patterns. She began documenting everything with timestamps and evidence. And she waited. 2 weeks later, Ruth sent an urgent text. He's at the club, talking about London flights, 3 weeks from now. Mary's response was calm. Perfect, that's enough time. Joseph found her that night, surrounded by papers, her laptop glowing in the dark. Sister, you need to sleep. I will, soon. She looked up at him. Do you remember what Mama used to say about rivers? The river remembers everything thrown into it, Joseph recited. Eventually it returns them to shore. David thinks the flood took everything from me, Mary said softly. He thinks I'm drowning while he swims in luxury. But I'm not drowning. I'm gathering evidence, building alliances, preparing. She pulled up a document, a detailed dossier on David's activities. 3 weeks. And that's all I need. And then what? Mary's smile was patient, almost serene. Then I teach him what it means to truly lose everything. She received a message. Ruth's brother confirming he'd found irregularities in international transactions matching Mary's descriptions. Anonymous evidence that could be forwarded to the right authorities. But Mary had time. 3 weeks. She opened her photo gallery, looking at Blessing from that morning, the child laughing, gap-toothed and innocent, unaware that her father had erased her from his new life story. Mary began typing. To whom it may concern, I write to report suspicious financial activities. The trap was being set, thread by careful thread. Let David plan his London escape. Let him book his flights, pack his designer clothes. The spider was weaving. And Mary received David's exact flight details. British Airways, 3 weeks and 2 days from now. First class to London Heathrow. She typed a response. Thank you. Now we wait. Then Mary did something she hadn't done since the flood. She smiled, not with happiness, but with certainty. Let him go, she whispered into the darkness. The trap is already set. David's accounts freeze. His phone won't stop ringing. The money that saved him is now destroying him. David Okafor stood at the ATM in Lekki Phase 1, his Mercedes idling behind him with the AC running. He'd inserted his GT Bank card for the 3rd time, and for the 3rd time, the screen flashed red. Transaction declined. Contact your bank. This is nonsense, he muttered. Trying his Access Bank card. Same result. Then his Zenith account. Same message. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He ignored it. It buzzed again. Different unknown number. Then another. Within 2 minutes, 7 calls from numbers he didn't recognize. David's hands started to sweat. He drove to the nearest GT Bank branch, rehearsing explanations in his head. Technical glitch, system error, nothing to worry about. But when he walked into the banking hall, the customer service officer's face changed the moment she saw his account number. "Please wait here, Mr. Okafor. The branch manager wants to see you." "For what?" "I just need to know why my account is frozen." "The manager will explain. Please sit." David didn't sit. He paced, watching other customers conduct their transactions normally while he waited. 20 minutes passed. His phone continued buzzing, now over 15 missed calls. Finally, the manager emerged. The middle-aged woman with reading glasses and an expression that said she'd dealt with this before. "Mr. Okafor, your account has been flagged for suspicious activity. We've received inquiries from the EFCC regarding the source of your deposits over the past 3 months. The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission." David's blood ran cold. "There must be a mistake. I'm a businessman. Those are legitimate earnings from—" "I'm not at liberty to discuss the details," the manager interrupted smoothly. "You'll need to contact the EFCC directly. We're required to cooperate with their investigation. All your accounts with us are frozen pending their review." "All of them?" "Yes, sir. I suggest you check your other banks as well." David left the bank in a daze. He sat in his Mercedes, air conditioning blasting, and called his other banks. An Access Bank, frozen. Zenith, frozen. Even his small Polaris account that held only 50,000 Naira, frozen. In one morning, he'd gone from having nearly 8 million Naira across his accounts to having access to nothing. His phone rang again. This time he answered. "Mr. David Okafor?" A crisp, official voice. "This is Inspector Adebayo from the EFCC. We need you to come to our office to answer some questions regarding financial transactions linked to your accounts. When can you come in?" I don't understand. What transactions?" "We'll discuss that when you come in. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Victoria Island office. Don't be late." The line went dead. David sat there, hands trembling on the steering wheel. The leather seats that had felt like success 2 hours ago now felt like a trap. How? How had this happened? And he'd been so careful. The money was supposed to be clean, filtered through enough hands that it couldn't be traced back to the area boy's smuggling operation. Another call. This time from Emeka, one of his new friends from the club. "Guy, what's going on?" "Immigration just called me asking about you. They're asking if I know about your travel plans, whether I've witnessed you moving large amounts of cash." "David, what did you do?" "Nothing. I didn't—" "They mentioned money laundering." "Money laundering, David. I can't be associated with this. Don't call me again." Click. David's world was collapsing in real time. He tried calling Chief, the area boy who'd recruited him for the dollar running jobs. The number was disconnected. He tried the other contacts from that world. All disconnected. They'd cut him loose. Over the next 3 days, David watched his carefully constructed new life disintegrate. His landlord in Victoria Island received an anonymous tip that David was involved in criminal activity. The tenancy agreement, barely 2 months old, was terminated. His gym membership was canceled when his payment bounced. The exclusive lounge where he'd networked with Lagos's young elite sent a polite email suggesting he settle his outstanding tab immediately or face legal action. His phone never stopped ringing. Unknown numbers. Messages from people claiming to be journalists, investigators, former associates, some threatening, some probing, all dangerous. David moved from his luxury apartment to a cheap hotel in Yaba, paying cash from the small stash he kept hidden in his car. But even that wouldn't last long. On the 4th day, Ruth, the cocktail server from Club Quilox, approached him at a roadside buka where he was eating cheap rice and stew, trying to make his remaining cash stretch. "You're David Okafor, right? Or is it Okoro?" He looked up sharply. "Who's asking?" "Just someone who thinks you should know. The streets are talking. People know what you did. People know about the woman and child you left in the flood." David's appetite vanished. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really?" Ruth pulled out her phone, showing him a Facebook post that had been shared 300 times. It was his old wedding photo, side by side with his recent club photos. The caption read, "This man abandoned his wife and daughter during the Ajagunle flood to save stolen money. Now he's living large while they suffer. Lagos. Do you know him?" The post had hundreds of comments. People tagging others, sharing the story, expressing outrage. Someone had even found his Victoria Island address and posted it. "How?" David's voice cracked. "How did people find out? Maybe someone who knew the truth decided it was time for it to come out." Ruth's smile was cold. "Enjoy your meal." She walked away, leaving David staring at his phone as the post continued to be shared, the comments multiplying, his face becoming infamous across Lagos social media. That evening, sitting in his cramped hotel room, David did something he hadn't done in months. He thought about Mary and Blessing. Where were they? Were they safe? Had they survived? The questions felt absurd even as he asked them. Of course they'd survived. Someone had orchestrated all of this. Someone had fed information to the EFCC, to immigration, to social media. Someone had systematically destroyed everything he'd built. But who? Mary was a nurse's aide with no connections, no resources. She'd been drowning in that flood the last time he saw her. Unless... His phone rang. Another unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. "David." The voice was familiar in a way that made his heart stop. "Or should I call you David Okafor now?" "Mary?" "You sound surprised. Did you think I was dead? That's what you told people, isn't it? That your wife died in the flood?" David's mouth went dry. How did I survive? The same way people survive when they don't have money to save them, through community, through help from people who actually care about others." Mary's voice was calm, eerily calm. "Oh, the same Mrs. Adeyemi you pretended not to recognize at ShopRite. She helped pull me and Blessing from that water. The same neighbors you abandoned helped us that night." "Mary, listen, I can explain." "Explain what? How you chose $15,000 over your daughter's life? How you've been living in luxury while we slept on floors and ate once a day? How you told everyone I was dead?" David had no answer. "I've been watching you, David. Learning your patterns, documenting your spending, tracking your money. And I've been talking to people. People who know where that money came from. People who can connect it to things the EFCC would be very interested in." "You reported me?" David's voice rose. "You destroyed my life?" "No, David. You destroyed your own life when you made your choice in that flood. Now I'm just making sure you understand what you lost. The money is gone. The accounts are frozen. What more do you want?" There was a long pause. When Mary spoke again, her voice carried a weight that made David's blood run cold. "I want you to come home. Back to Ajagunle. Tomorrow night, 8 p.m. The old market by the church. Come alone." "Why would I?" "Because if you don't, everything I've held back gets released. The full evidence of your money laundering. The recorded conversations from the area boys naming you. The testimony of everyone who saw you abandon your family. It all goes public, David. And instead of just frozen accounts, you'll have a jail cell. You're blackmailing me? I'm giving you a choice. The same kind of choice you gave me in that flood. Choose wisely." The line went dead, and David sat in the hotel room as darkness fell, staring at his phone. Outside, Lagos continued its endless noise and chaos. But inside that small room, everything was silent except for the sound of David's racing heart. He looked at his reflection in the darkened window. The man staring back didn't look like the successful businessman he'd been pretending to be. He looked like exactly what he was, a man who'd made a terrible choice and was only beginning to understand its cost. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number with a single attachment, a photo of Blessing, smiling, wearing a school uniform. The message below read, "She asks about you sometimes. She wonders why Daddy left. Tomorrow, 8 p.m. Be there." David closed his eyes. Thus the elders in his village used to say something his mother had repeated often. "The river remembers everything you throw into it. It might swallow it for a time, but the river always returns what's owed." He'd thrown his family into the flood and walked away with money. Now the river was calling in its debt. If you were Mary, would you stop now or finish what you started? Like, subscribe and comment what justice should look like. In a flooded market stall at night, David begs. The old Ajagunle market looked different at night. David stood at the entrance, rain beginning to fall again. Not the catastrophic flood of 3 months ago, but steady, persistent, like memory itself. The market stalls were closed, their metal shutters creating corridors of shadow between weak streetlights. He was early. 7:45 p.m. Mary had said 8 p.m., and his phone had died hours ago. No money to buy electricity. The designer shoes he wore were scuffed from days of walking. His last 2,000 naira sat in his pocket, all that remained of the fortune he'd chosen over his family. Footsteps echoed in the darkness. Mary emerged from between two stalls, carrying an umbrella. Behind her walked Joseph, her brother. But it was the small figure holding Mary's hand that made David's breath catch. Blessing. His daughter looked taller, though only 3 months had passed. She wore a neat school uniform, a private school Mary couldn't have afforded alone. The child's eyes met his with no recognition, only curiosity, as if looking at a stranger. "Blessing," David's voice cracked. "Don't." Mary's words stopped him. "You don't get to say her name. Not yet. Not until you've earned it. Mary, please. I know I made a mistake." "A mistake?" Joseph cut in. "You call abandoning your wife and child in a flood to die a mistake?" "I didn't steal." "Don't lie." Mary's composure cracked. She pulled out a phone and played an audio file. David's own voice filled the air. "I did my part. Where's the rest of my payment?" David's knees weakened. "How did you—" "Mrs. Adeyemi recorded you on the phone that day at ShopRite. When I showed people what you'd done, they helped me build a case." Mary stepped closer. "I have everything. The EFCC has copies. Immigration has copies. One phone call, and they'll move from investigation to arrest. You'll spend years in Kirikiri prison." "Then why am I here?" Mary looked at Blessing, then back at David. "Because that little girl still wakes up sometimes asking where her daddy is. She draws pictures of our family with you in them. I had to decide whether my revenge was worth making her watch her father go to prison." "Mary, I'm not finished." Mary's hand tightened around Blessing's. "You're going to make a choice tonight, David. The same kind of choice you made in the flood. But this time with full knowledge of consequences." Joseph stepped forward, holding a folder. "These are papers transferring ownership of everything you claim to have earned. The Mercedes title, rights to remaining accounts, admission of how you obtained the money, signed testimony confirming you abandoned your family." "You want me to give up everything?" "Everything you stole," Mary corrected. "Everything bought with criminal money. Everything you valued more than us. And if I refuse, then I make the call. EFCC arrests you tonight. You go to court, get convicted, spend 5 to 7 years in prison. Blessing grows up visiting her father behind bars if I allow it. The court seizes your assets anyway. David looked at the documents, then at Blessing. The little girl watched him with wide eyes, trying to understand why this strange man was crying. And if I sign? You sign everything over. The money goes into a trust for Blessing's education and to help flood victims. You agree to leave Lagos, go back to our village, start over with nothing. You stay away from us unless I decide Blessing is ready to know you. I lose everything and you let me walk away? You already lost everything when you made your choice in the flood. This is just making it official. David's hands shook as he reached for the folder. Joseph handed him a pen. And the documents were thorough. Bank transfers, asset forfeitures, sworn statements, even a restraining order. How long did you plan this? David asked. Every day since you left us to drown, Mary replied. Every double shift I worked, every time Blessing cried for you, I planned this, not with anger, David, with purpose. You want me to lose everything like you did. No, I want you to understand what matters. I didn't lose everything in that flood. I lost you and realized you were never worth having. But I kept Blessing. I kept my dignity. I kept my community. You lost all of that when you walked away. A small voice broke the tension. Mama, why is that man crying? Blessing's question hung in the air. Mary knelt beside her. Sometimes people cry when they realize they made very bad choices. A baby. Is he the bad man who left us? The question hit David like a physical blow. His daughter didn't know him. To her, he was just the bad man from Mama's story. Mary stood facing David. Sign the papers or I make the call. Choose now. David looked at the pen. 3 months ago, he'd chosen between dollars and his family. Now he chose between freedom and consequences. But this time he understood. The choice wasn't between freedom and prison. It was between the man he'd become and the man he might still be able to be. His hand moved. The signature was shaky but binding. David Okoro, his real name, appeared on document after document. Joseph collected the papers, checking each signature. The Mercedes keys. David pulled them from his pocket, held them for a moment, then handed them over. Is there anything else? David's voice was hollow. Mary reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. There's 2,000 naira in here and a bus ticket to Ugbowo village. It leaves in 2 hours from Jibowu. Take it and go. That's it? That's more than you left us with. We were drowning with nothing. You get bus fare and a chance to start over. That's more mercy than you showed us. David took the envelope with numb fingers. He looked at Blessing one more time. Can I? He started, but Mary's expression stopped him. No, not today. Maybe someday, if you become someone worth knowing. But not today. David nodded slowly. He turned to leave, then stopped. Mary, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. You're right. It doesn't. But it's a start. Go home, David. I learned what you should have known. That some things have no price. David walked into the rain, carrying nothing but an envelope and the weight of his choices. Behind him, Blessing's voice. Mama, are we going home now? Yes, baby, we're going home. David didn't look back. The tears blurred his vision, mixing with rain as he walked through Ajagunle one final time. The bus station was crowded when David arrived. He bought water and sat on a hard plastic bench, waiting. A woman beside him argued on the phone about money. A child cried for food. An old man slept sitting up, hands on a small bag. They had little, but they protected what mattered. David had had everything and protected nothing that mattered. The bus to Ugbowo village arrived at midnight. David climbed aboard, finding a seat in the back. As the bus pulled away, and he watched Lagos lights fade through the dusty window. He was going back to nothing. No money, no reputation, no family waiting. Just the village he'd left 8 years ago, promising to return successful. The bus driver played gospel music. An old hymn his mother used to sing, "Nothing in my hands I bring, simply to thy cross I cling." David closed his eyes. He'd brought money in his hands and lost everything. Now he had nothing, but perhaps that was the only way to begin again. Outside, lightning flickered. The rainy season wasn't over yet, but somewhere in Lagos, a mother tucked her daughter into bed and whispered a prayer. Not for revenge, but for justice served and burdens lifted. The river had claimed its debt, and in the morning both would wake to new beginnings, hers built on strength, his on humility. And David thinks he's escaping to Canada. He walks into the airport smiling. 6 months had passed since the rainy night in Ajagunle Market. David Okoro sat in his mother's compound in Ugbowo village, sweating under the afternoon sun as he repaired the fence around her yam farm. His hands were calloused now, nails permanently stained with red earth. The designer clothes were long gone, replaced by worn trousers and a faded t-shirt. His mother brought him water in a clay pot. "You work hard today," she observed, "like you're trying to run from something." David didn't answer. He'd told her a simplified version of what happened, that his business in Lagos failed, that he needed to start over. She'd accepted him back without questions, the way mothers do, but sometimes he caught her watching him with sad, knowing eyes. And his phone, a basic Nokia now, rang. Unknown number. David had learned to fear unknown numbers, but he answered anyway. "Mr. Okoro." The voice was crisp, professional. "This is Agent Morrison from the Canadian Embassy. Your work visa application has been approved." David's heart stopped. "What?" "Your application for temporary work permit in Alberta. It's been approved. You'll need to come to Lagos to complete final documentation, but congratulations." I didn't apply for a Canadian visa." "Our records show you did, sir. 3 months ago. Agricultural worker program. Everything's in order." The call ended. David stared at his phone, confused. He hadn't applied for anything. He'd been living quietly in the village, working his mother's farm, keeping his head down. A text message arrived. "Check your email. M. Mary." David's hands shook as he borrowed his mother's smartphone and logged into the email account he rarely checked. There it was, a complete Canadian visa application in his name, professionally done, with job offer letters from an Alberta farming cooperative, character references, financial documentation. Another text. "The job is real. The offer is real. If you want to start over properly, this is your chance. Or you can stay in the village. Your choice. But if you take it, you work honestly, you send money back for blessing school fees, and you become someone worthy of eventually knowing her. Prove you learned something." David sat in the red dust of his mother's compound, reading the message over and over. Mary had done this. After everything, after he'd signed away his stolen wealth, and after he'd lost everything, she was giving him a ladder out of the pit. But why? His phone rang again. This time he recognized the number. Mary. "Why?" David asked when he answered. "Because Blessing asked about you last week." Mary's voice was calm. "She asked if her daddy was dead or just lost. I told her you were lost, but might be finding your way back. I don't deserve this. No, you don't. But she deserves a father who might become worth knowing. This isn't forgiveness, David. It's investment in my daughter's future peace of mind. Take the opportunity, work hard, send support for her education, and maybe, in a few years, you'll have earned the right to meet her properly." The EFCC? "The case is closed. You returned the stolen assets. They went into the flood relief fund. The area boys' operation was shut down. The real criminals are facing charges. You cooperated fully. You're clear, legally." David's throat tightened. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll do better. Say you'll work honestly. Say you'll remember what matters." Mary paused. "And David, if you take this chance and waste it, if you fall back into greed or dishonesty, I won't give you another one. This is it. I understand. Good. Your flight is in 2 weeks. Everything you need is in that email. The line went dead. 2 weeks later, David stood in the international terminal at Murtala Mohammed Airport, carrying a small backpack with everything he owned. He wore simple clothes, carried honest documents, and for the first time in a year, walked with something approaching peace. But Mary had planned one final lesson. As David approached the immigration counter, a hand touched his shoulder. He turned to see Joseph, Mary's brother, standing with 2 other men in official-looking badges. David's blood ran cold. "What? Relax," Joseph said. "We're not here to arrest you. We're here to make sure you understand something." One of the men opened a folder, showing David photos. The first was of the flood relief fund Mary had created with his returned money. A new community center in Ajagunle, raised above flood level, serving as both a school and emergency shelter. The second photo showed children in school uniforms, studying in clean classrooms. 12 students on full scholarship from the fund you contributed to, the man explained, including your daughter. The third photo showed David himself, from 6 months ago, disheveled and broken at the market. "We've been watching you in the village. The work you've done for your mother, the way you've helped neighbors, the fact that you've stayed clean. That's why this opportunity is real." Joseph stepped closer. "My sister believes in second chances, but she's not foolish. You're getting this opportunity because you've started to earn it. Don't make her regret it." "I won't," David whispered. "Remember something," Joseph continued. "That flood took your money, your fake life, your pride. But it gave you a chance to find your humanity again. Don't lose it a second time." They stepped back, and David continued through immigration. The officer checked his documents, stamped his passport, waved him through. David walked toward his gate, then stopped. He pulled out his phone and typed a message. "Thank you. I'll make you proud. I'll make her proud. I promise." The response came quickly. "Don't promise me. Promise yourself. Be the father she deserves, even from far away." David boarded the plane to Canada with tears in his eyes. Below him, Lagos sprawled in organized chaos. Somewhere in that city, his daughter was going to school, learning, growing, protected by a mother who'd turned pain into purpose. The flight attendant asked if he wanted a drink. David requested water. Just water. As the plane climbed above the clouds, David thought about the flood that had changed everything. The elders were right. The river remembers. It had taken everything he valued wrongly and returned what he'd lost through his own foolishness, his real name, his humility, his chance to become worthy. In Festac, Mary sat with Blessing, helping with homework. The child was reading now, devouring books about faraway places. "Mama," Blessing asked, "do you think Daddy will ever come home?" Mary chose her words carefully. "If he learns what he needs to learn, if he becomes who he's supposed to be, maybe someday you'll meet him properly, but he has a long way to go." "I hope he makes it," Blessing said simply, then returned to her book. Mary smiled. Her daughter had her father's eyes, but, thankfully, her mother's heart. The flood relief fund continued to grow. Mary had started working with other flood victims, creating a community network for disaster preparedness. The woman who'd once struggled to survive was now helping others do the same. Mrs. Adeyemi, Ruth, Joseph, all the people who'd helped Mary build her case, gathered one evening at the new community center. "You gave him a second chance," Ruth observed. After everything." "I gave Blessing a chance at eventual peace," Mary corrected. "Whether David takes it or wastes it is his choice. But my daughter won't grow up wondering if her father could have changed. She'll know I gave him the opportunity." "And if he fails?" Mrs. Adeyemi asked. "Then she'll know he chose to fail. Either way, she has her answer." Mary looked around the center, at the children studying, at the flood maps on the walls teaching preparedness, at the community coming together. This is what matters. Not revenge, not punishment, building something better from the ruins. As the sun set over Lagos, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Mary walked home with Blessing. They passed the spot where the flood had reached its highest point, now marked with a painted line and a memorial. We remember, we rebuild. Do we rise? A year later, David sent his first money transfer from Canada. Not much, just his first month's honest wages after expenses. The note attached read, "For Blessing's school fees. More to come. Working hard, staying honest, learning what matters." Mary deposited it in Blessing's education trust, then filed the note in a folder marked Proof of Progress. 2 years later, David sent a photo of himself on the Canadian farm, sun-weathered and genuinely smiling, holding vegetables he'd grown. "Never thought I'd love farming," the message read, "but there's something about growing things honestly. Tell Blessing I'm proud of her grades. Someday when she's ready, I'd like to meet who she's becoming." Mary showed Blessing the photo. The child, now 6, studied it carefully. "He looks different," she observed. "And people can change," Mary said, "if they choose to." "Do you think he chose to?" "I think he's trying. That's a start." 5 years after the flood, Blessing was 9. She'd won a science competition at school and wanted to call her father to tell him. Mary made the call happen. David's voice shook when he heard his daughter's voice properly for the first time in years. She told him about her project, about her friends, about her dreams. When the call ended, Blessing looked at her mother. "He cried," she said. "Sometimes people cry when they realize what they almost lost forever," Mary explained. "Will I meet him?" "When you're ready. When he's proven he's worth meeting." Blessing thought about it, then nodded. "Okay." The flood had taken everything: money, marriage, the life David thought he wanted. But in the ruins, something better had grown. A daughter thriving, a mother who'd turned pain into power, a community rebuilt stronger, and in Canada, a man learning that the wealth you earn honestly, the connections you build with integrity, the person you become through humble work, these things the flood can never wash away. David would eventually return to Nigeria years later to finally meet his daughter face to face. By then, he would have earned it. By then, Blessing would be ready. But that's another story. This story ends with a mother and daughter walking home through Lagos streets at sunset, hand in hand, safe and strong and free. The river had claimed its debt. Justice had run its course. And from the flood, new life had grown. Did David deserve this ending? Comment your thoughts. Like this story, if you believe karma is real, and subscribe for more African folktales like this.